Well, thank you for that, and thanks for having me. So, representing a shift here, not talking about science, but talking about science. To me, a lot about science communication does have to do with communicating, with relaying a sense of trust, because it's hard to trust somebody that you don't really understand. So a lot of that to me also has to do with being really clear about your message. I've been at UC Davis for about 5 years working with scientists in the environmental realm. I love doing this. I love connecting journalists with science, and they love getting out and doing and seeing the work that you do, especially those of you who work with water. It's an easy sell, actually. You might be happy to hear that you are already fairly well trusted. Scientists rank somewhere above lawyers and below teachers and doctors, so good job on that. You're actually a little more trusted than journalists, too, so that's a really good sign for you. People think you have value. Good for you.
Too often, a small study with nuanced, tentative findings gets blown out of all proportion when it's presented to us, the lay public. Sometimes that happens when a scientific body puts out a press release summarising the study for a wider audience. For instance, earlier this year, a medical society hosted a conference at which a paper was presented comparing the effects of high and low flavanol chocolate during pregnancy. If that sounds narrow and technical, it was supposed to be. There wasn't even a control group of women who didn't eat chocolate, and the study found no difference in preeclampsia or high blood pressure between women who ate the two chocolates. So there is no way a study that boring can make it to television, right? Well, wait. Because that medical society issued a press release with the much sexier but pretty misleading title, The Benefits of Chocolate During Pregnancy. And because most TV producers just read press releases, this happens.
Turns out if you're pregnant, eating 30 grams a day of chocolate, that's about 2/3 of a chocolate bar, not the whole chocolate bar, could improve blood flow to the placenta and benefit the growth and development of your baby, especially in women at risk for preeclampsia or high blood pressure in pregnancy.
Except that's not what the study said. It's like a game of telephone. The substance gets distorted at every step. And I can only imagine how someone who watched that segment must have described it the next day. Oh, the news said our baby is made of chocolate and it's okay if I eat it, but only 2/3.
Okay, sorry, it was a little out of sync there. But what I meant to say before he started talking, excuse me, John, is that there are barriers to trust. And a big one is about how clearly you're communicating. This is people's worst nightmare when you talk to journalists, this idea that they're going to get it wrong. And in the end, it is on the journalists to get it right, to make sure they're getting it right. That's their responsibility. But there are things that you as scientists can do to help ensure that this game of telephone doesn't happen. And that goes back to really being secure in the message that you're conveying. So I want you to just take a couple seconds, look at the slide. Tell me, what did you see? Anybody? Okay, like all sorts of things, right? Because I threw everything at you. There was a bazillion things up there. How can you know what to focus on? When you tell people too much, when you show people too much, they're gonna look at what they want to look at and what resonates with them, not necessarily with what you're hoping that they're going to pick up from you. So maybe if I'd shown a slide like this, do you think your answers would be more in line with each other? Would you all have kind of had a similar way of what you saw? Probably. So again, this goes back to craft your message. And when I say message, I don't just mean think about what's the key finding in your work or in the study that you just put out. It's really about what is the thing that you're actually wanting people to know and understand. That's your message. That's the thing that will be your anchor when you're talking to journalists and things are getting off track a bit, or you're getting nervous, or really when you're talking to anybody, policymakers, third graders. Know what it is that you're going in there to say. Because again, once you get lost, you can always hone back to it. And it helps things be clear. And a huge part of crafting your message, it sounds so simple, but people fail to do it all the time, which is be able to answer, so what? Sometimes scientists get upset when journalists ask them this. It's like, what do you mean, why should you care? They don't mean to insult you. They are truly just asking you what everybody's asking themselves when they read a story, listen to something on the radio. They're asking themselves, why does this matter to me? Why should I take time out of my day to listen to this or see this? So you, when you're communicating what you have to say, be able to answer this for people because it's really top of their mind. And once you can answer that, you've opened them to being able to hone in on those details that you're anxious to get to talking about, right? I want to walk through an idea of honing your message. So this is an example from our Bodega Marine Science Laboratory. They're leading a captive breeding program for white abalone. And the main issue that they're working around is this issue of white abalone are nearing extinction. What's the problem behind that? White abalone are no longer reproducing in the wild because we've overfished them so much. What could be a possible solution? A successful captive breeding program could help with that. What would be the benefits to that? Maybe eventually we could reintroduce them to the wild. And then, so what? Why am I telling this story? What am I trying to get across really to people? It's that this captive breeding program that we have might be white abalone's last chance at avoiding extinction. And so once you're this sounds so simple, but it is so hard to be simple, and you have to take the time to do it, because this white abalone program has a lot of details to it, and a lot of technicalities and all of that, but in the end, this is sort of what it's about, and it's the sort of thing that has caught people's attention, and it's why they come and see it and write about it. So for scientists, think about it like an inverted pyramid. When you write a research study, you put the background on top, and then the methods, and then at the end is the conclusions, right, and your results. So when you're talking with the public, just flip that. Put your results right up top, quickly followed by a brief, so what, why should I care, what are the implications of this, and then delve into the details and the methods that you want to talk about. So I'm not saying that those details aren't important. I'm just saying don't say them first. Just give your so what first. And so be clear or risk being misunderstood. That's a lot of what this is about. That leads me into jargon. Jargon in the scientific world is the most precise term you can think of to communicate with your peers, right? It's exactly what you mean. It's exactly what you mean to say. And that works well for the scientific community. But when you talk to the public, jargon quickly becomes gibberish, a total foreign language, and you lose them. And not only do you lose them, but you alienate them. And some of them feel like you're talking down to them. And this again goes back to that trust issue. They need to feel like you're a real person. So when you're, just be aware of the words that you use. And your peers who are out of your field are very good at noticing when you're using jargon, by the way. Other scientists love to point out jargon and when we do these science communication games that another field's using. But it's hard to know sometimes in your own field that it's jargon because it's just how you talk. So, salmonid. When you're talking to the public, just say salmon or trout or whatever specifically it is that you're talking about because they don't really know what salmonid is. Some do, but more than you realize don't. Bivalve is one of my all-time favorite ones. You don't go to a seafood restaurant and order bivalves with your risotto. Like, nobody really knows what that is. Crazy enough. Just say, what it is that you're talking about. Scallops or clams or whatever it is. But my peers will think I'm dumb if I say that. And I've had people tell this exactly to me, that they get worried they're like, if I don't say that term, my peers will think I'm dumb. And it's like, I get it, and it's a real fear that many scientists have. And it's a huge barrier to this clear messaging, again. And what I would say to that is simply, your audience is this broader public, and you have to remember them. And the other thing that jargon does is it just tells the editor for the journalist that you're working with, it just tells them where to cut. It says that they won't make it in. It's not. You're not going to get quoted. It won't be used. Your peers won't ever hear it. Clear is credible. There was a Stanford study that looked at a bunch of retracted scientific studies and found that those that were retracted were more likely to use jargon. There was about 60 more jargon-like words per paper compared to unretracted papers. Sometimes people kind of hide behind jargon. So be kind to each other when you're endeavoring on this science communication work. It's not easy to put yourself out there, but it's really important work trying to get the public to understand what you do. So be nice to each other. Another example of this, ecosystem services is a term a lot of people have issues with. It started to be bandied about probably before, but right after the BP oil spill, it was used a lot. And the Nature Conservancy did a national survey and found that only about 31% of the public knew what it meant or thought it was a useful term. 70% of the people really didn't know what it was. They could just say something like my 6-year-old would understand, which is like nature's benefits. Nature has value. You know, this is a simpler term. So if we're not using these jargony words and phrases, what do? We look for a simple, not simplified, not simplistic, but a simple explanation. And metaphors and analogies are huge friends for this. Some examples. This scientist was presenting, doing some Senate testimony about plastics in the ocean. And she took this idea of an overflowing bathtub. When you have an overflowing bathtub, you don't stop and start wiping it up off the floor. You go and turn off the faucet, right? So she used this analogy to talk about plastics in the ocean and how we need to cut it off at the source. And it was very effective. I worked with an atmospheric scientist here, Ian Faluna. He had found that about 10% of the smog in California's Central Valley was coming from Asia. And he had talked to me about how he thought of, you know, California, the Golden Gate, as the lips of California sucking in this air from Asia and it entering into the lungs of the Central Valley. I was like, well, that's a really vivid analogy right there. But it made me think about secondhand smoke, like this idea that what someone else is doing is affecting our health. And so secondhand smog is accurate, alliterative, resonates with people, and sure enough, you know, he used it in his communications, we used it in our press release, it got picked up by a lot of news reports, and that specific term did, and it was just a very easy in for people to understand exactly what we were talking about. So we are, in our own ways, are trying to help the public fall in love with science. And part of that is because we want them to use it. We want them to start making decisions based on it, and we want them to trust it. So how do you make the public fall in love with science? Part of it does start with you. You as scientists are a connection for them. When you're out talking to people, you're someone they know. You're someone they might trust. And, you know, it's crazy and simple as it sounds, it's so effective when you're a real person, when you are real and relatable and you share your passion. Scientists are some of the most passionate people I've ever met in my life. Sometimes when I have no idea what you're saying, I just like to listen to you because you're excited. Like, it's great to see. And, you know, so you can capture in that. People love discovery. So don't be afraid to share it. So in closing, just know your message. Clear messages do help build trust and understanding, and if we ever hope to have a world where where people are making decisions based on science, I think we need to have some more of that trust and understanding coming forth. Thank you. Probably no time for questions. No time for questions, probably.
But we're going to have 15 minutes at the end for questions and panel discussion. But if anyone has a quick question right now, more than welcome.
Yeah.
I just want to say something about chocolate. Pediatric hospitals have a protocol that contraindicates chocolate for nursing mothers. Pediatric hospitals have protocols that contraindicate chocolate for nursing mothers. Olympic athletes are tested for chocolate. Racehorses are tested for chocolate. A pharmaceutical called theobromine is extracted from chocolate, and it's sold by prescription. And your chocolate movie smacks of scientific fraud.
Well, exactly. I mean, it was supposed to. That was one of the points, was that it was not clearly, they were unclear from the beginning, from the press release. That press release never should have gone out. They never should have had a press release that just over-exploited it to the extent that they did, and it set off the chain that the media picked up. So I hope that point came across, but yeah, very, very much, I agree. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Kat.